pretty picture behind me. He's like, don't check up on the facts that I'm about to tell you. Is it like, it's, for all you know, it's facts, 100%.
I've been dealing with people who are like, we need to meet because we need to brief you about your speaking. And I'm like, but I'm speaking in 2 weeks' time. Like, this is how I
For
focus.
plastics?
No, no, no. No, this is here. That's like 20 seconds. And they want to brief me.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I hope everyone can hear me. Perhaps a logistical question: you should switch on your mic, your headphones by pressing on the white button, and then the red light should be on. And if you don't hear anything, you should push it again to switch channels. Apparently, can you hear me? No. Can you hear me? If you don't hear me, press the white button again and make sure the red light is on. Okay, my colleague is just checking in the room. Okay, he's just double checking that everyone can hear me. I see some people nodding. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, so now that the majority of people can hear me, I think it's safe to start. Okay, so just waiting a couple more seconds. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay, perfect. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our side event this morning. My name is Arno, and I work at the Federal Public Service Environment of Belgium at the Department of Marine Environment. We're very pleased to have you here today as we dive into some of the most pressing topics concerning our ocean and climate. Today's agenda brings together distinguished experts and voices from around the world, each bringing unique insights into the challenges and opportunities we face in ocean conservation and climate adaptation. Our discussions will focus on key questions surrounding nationally determined contributions, adaptation policies, and indicators, topics that are pivotal as we move forward in integrating ocean-based climate actions into global goals. We will start our side event today with a panel discussion, followed by a presentation on oyster reef restoration in the Belgian part of the North Sea, followed by a speech by Belgium's newly appointed Special Envoy on BBNJ. And at the end of our program, the event will be closed by Her Excellency Tine van der Straeten, who is Minister for Energy of Belgium. So without further ado, let's start the panel discussion. So dear panelists, thank you very much for being here today. We're looking forward to hearing your insights. But let me start by introducing you first. So on my left-hand side, our first panelist is Angelique Pouponneau, who is an environmental lawyer and advisor to the ambassador of Palau at the UN mission. She holds an LLM in environmental law, specializing in law of the sea and natural resources law. Welcome to you. Secondly, we have Lili Jangliu, who is our youngest panelist today, and I heard that you're only 16 years old, so thank you very much for being here. Lili is a member of the World Ocean Day Youth Advisory Council and also a UN youth delegate, and she represents a youth perspective on ocean conservation and policy. Our third panelist today is Olive Vai, who is the Oceania Pacific Regional Coordinator at the High Seas Alliance. And her work focuses on ocean conservation challenges and opportunities in the Pacific region, particularly under the pressures of climate change. And then finally, we have Mr. Ulrich Leenaerts, who is the Deputy Head of Belgium's UNFCCC delegation. And he has recently taken on the role of co-facilitator for the Ocean and Climate Change Dialogue, which aims to foster collaboration across sectors. Welcome, dear panelists. Before we start the actual panel, I'd like to start with a short round of warm-up questions, and each of you will have 3 to 5 minutes to share your perspective. And following that, we'll dive into the structured discussions on our core themes. So, Angelique, I'll start with you. You've been looking at the Western Indian Ocean. In your view, how do overlapping jurisdictions serve as an opportunity or a barrier to establishing area-based management tools?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about sort of my ocean basin. My name is Angelique Pouponneau. I'm from the Seychelles. And of course, the Western Indian Ocean is the ocean basin closest to my heart. I think the interesting governance question around the Western Indian Ocean, and particularly if we kind of swim out beyond 200 nautical miles out and into the areas beyond national jurisdiction, is this very complex overlapping jurisdictions of various organizations, bodies, institutions, and frameworks that exist. And here, just to give you a snapshot, just so you get a sense of the complexity, but also, which may be a barrier, but also an opportunity that the BBNJ agreement provides for cooperation, for coordination. So just so you get a bit of a sense of that. So in the Western Indian Ocean, the reason areas-based management tools has gained a lot of interest, a lot of excitement, is a place called the Saya de Mala. And the Saya de Mala is known to have, or said to have, I think there's still some scientific work that needs to be done, to have the largest seagrass bank in the world. And this, of course, has attracted a lot of interest as potentially the prospect of thinking about areas-based management tool and high seas marine protection from a climate change perspective. And here, of course, thinking about the carbon cycle and carbon sequestration and absorption. But the Saya de Mala, interestingly, is a seagrass bank, and it sits on the extended continental shelf of the Seychelles and Mauritius. All right, so that's your initial framework. So you have an area where Seychelles and Mauritius, the extended continental shelf, where Seychelles and Mauritius said, actually, we don't want to fight about delimitation of to the Commission of Limits for the extended continental shelf. We're just going to agree to jointly manage the area. So this is, again, one governance innovation where Seychelles and Mauritius are jointly managing this area, and it's called the, no creativity here, the Joint Management Area. And so this is one framework. It's governed by a treaty between the two countries. It has been recognized by the Commission of the Limits of the Continental Shelf. And then, of course, above that is high seas, but also operating in this space are regional fisheries management organizations, so RFMOs. And here you have the Indian Ocean Tuna Commission, which extends both within and beyond national jurisdiction. But you also have the Southern Indian Ocean Fisheries Agreement, which deals with more deep sea ecosystems. And there's been fascinating conversation about where is the seagrass? Is it on the extended continental shelf because it sits on the bank? Or is it in the high seas, so it's governed more by BBNJ and potentially other regimes? So this overlapping complexity of jurisdiction introduces complexity, but what the BBNJ agreement suggests is we need to cooperate. We need to coordinate amongst these different regimes. And I'd say that this is a really fascinating opportunity to see how we can get national governments who are jointly managing an area, RFMOs, and of course, the Conference of the Parties, once the BBNJ agreement enters into force, to start thinking about how we all talk to each other, how we all look at what could be potentially an area-based management tool in the Western Indian Ocean. So lots of overlapping jurisdictions, lots of complexity, but the BBNJ agreement a key tool to unlock what could be a very interesting move to have regimes really talk to each other. Thanks.
Thank you very much for sharing that, and let's hope that other initiatives to protect sensible areas will follow suit. Lily, as I said in the beginning, you've been involved in impactful initiatives from climate education to high-level policy discussions at the United Nations. Could you perhaps share what first inspired your passion for climate action, given the fact that you're so young, and also how does raising awareness empowers young people to protect our ocean and our planet?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, and I'm so excited to be here. So I grew up in a beach town called White Rock. My school was 5 minutes to the ocean, and it really allowed me to fall in love with the sea. It was an amazing experience growing up, just being in nature, and I really loved it. So I was really comfortable in just reveling, in the beauty of it. I could get an ice cream and walk down the pier. Then COVID happened. I think I was around 12. It feels like a really long time ago. And my aquarium was, in threat of being shut down. It was 2020. Not a lot of people were visiting. And the thing about that aquarium was that it would, rescue marine species. And, if they could be rehabilitated, they would be released back to the oceans. But some species couldn't. And I was really distressed that they would be left without a home. So I started doing a lot of social media advocacy at that time, trying to raise money for the aquarium. And I also created an art installation with some of my friends using plastics to raise awareness and funds. And it was around that time that I got to, engage with the advocacy space. But also during that time, I learned how, though I really cared for the ocean, the climate, I love nature, I knew very little about it. The thing is, in British Columbia, my province, I live in Canada, climate and ocean is only introduced in our school curriculum in the 7th grade. And Canada really prides itself on being very eco-friendly, on caring for nature, so it is kind of ridiculous that it is introduced so late. And that's when I really started working on social media. I posted a series called Daily Climate and Ocean News, where I share daily updates because our news is we consume so much of our news on social media these days. And it was very important to me to get through my generation, who is so lacking in climate and ocean education because our school curriculum has failed to educate us. That's what led me to join Youngo and the United Nations, where I've had the opportunity to lobby for climate and ocean literacy. And this year, I had an opportunity to join the World Ocean Day Youth Council. So I've been around so many amazing youth activists who really encouraged me to keep going, and I wanted to do something tangible. I started creating my own climate and ocean curricula for young people, for elementary school specifically, and I'm going to test it out in workshops in February. I think it's so important to have young people who have, lived through these experiences, to be at these spaces, to advocate for what they believe in. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your story, and I must admit that your enthusiasm is truly inspiring, and I hope that it's contagious for younger generations. So you're doing a great job. Thank you. Olive, given your expertise in the Pacific region, what unique challenges and opportunities do you see for ocean conservation in the context of climate change?
Thank you for the question. I am also excited to be here. I am based in Samoa. So just to give you a preview of like why the Pacific region is so invested in this, the largest ocean is the Pacific Ocean, which measures at 168,737 square kilometers, and it covers 47% of the globe. And the BBNJ treaty is the first legally binding framework that looks at protecting biodiversity in the high seas. And this is of particular significance to the Pacific because it addresses critical issues on issues that are occurring outside national boundaries. In saying so, I believe that the convergence of the BBNJ treaty as well as the UNFCCC framework and CBD creates an opportunity to elevate interests, secure resources, and drive action for ocean conservation and climate change for the region. For the opportunities for the Pacific region, I'm speaking specifically on BBNJ, is the protection of biodiversity in high seas. So as you all know, the 60 ratifications are needed for it to enter into force in order for it to start the establishment of marine protected areas that are critical for the protection of habitats as well as species. Another one is the implementation of environmental impact assessments, which takes into account the potential cumulative impacts of climate change. They are considered in there. And the third one is on accessing marine genetic resources, particularly access and benefit sharing. For particular, for the marine protected areas, BBNJ presents an opportunity for the creation of first generation MPAs in high seas. This is an exciting opportunity to do so. So through the designation of the marine protected areas, the BBNJ is key to reaching the objectives of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and especially the target of protecting 30% of terrestrial, inland water, and coastal and marine areas by 2030, also known as the 30 by 30. Also, this work is important because this opportunity effectively protected marine protected areas are powerful allies in the fight against climate change, enhancing carbon storage, protecting biodiversity, and boosting ocean resilience. And last but not least, for the opportunities is the integration of traditional knowledge, which complements the science. So indigenous peoples and local communities are intrinsically linked to the ocean, and this is through cultural practices, stewardship, and sustainable use of migratory species. So indigenous peoples are key in identifying and designating these marine protected areas, aiming for protection and preservation of the marine environment, particularly fragile ecosystems, as well as habitats and endangered species and marine biodiversity. And just to touch briefly on the challenges, as we all know, the Pacific is at the forefront of climate change. So one of the challenges is the rising sea levels. In the next 30 years, Pacific Island nations such as Tuvalu, Kiribati, and Fiji will experience at least 6 inches, 15 centimeters of sea level rise, according to an analysis by NASA's Sea Level Change Science team. So many Pacific Island countries are low-lying coastal communities, and because of rising sea levels, this directly affects not only the local communities, but affects the marine habitats and biodiversity. Also, there is the funding and capacity building needs. As you all know, the Pacific Island countries need additional support to tackle the unique challenges posed to them by climate change. However, climate financing specifically tailored to ocean conservation remains limited. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olive, for elaborating a bit on BBNJ and the challenges posed by sea level rise. And also thank you for mentioning the 30 by 30 target. And I believe we will zoom a bit in on that during the panel. So thank you for sharing your views. Dear Ulrich, as the new co-facilitator of the Ocean and Climate Change Dialogue, how do you envision its work over the next 2 years, particularly in terms of breaking down the silos?
Well, thank you, Arno, and thanks a lot for having me in this panel. That's really a pleasure. Well, firstly, on the appointment for the co-facilitation of the Ocean and Climate Dialogue for the coming 2 years, not everything is formalized yet. So a bit of caution from my side. But in any case, I indeed have been proposed as facilitator for the developed countries. It has been announced by the SB chairs to the different groups. Well, to say a few things on this role. Well, firstly, really excited to get that role and to continue that work. I have been active in EU, certainly at the time when we had to decide on how the nexus between ocean and climate could be established in the UNFCCC process. That was in the run-up to the COP that finally took place not in Chile but in Madrid. And at that time, I really was pushing to give a high priority on that, to go for a pretty maximalistic approach. But in the past year with the EU presidency, I had a bit more of a general task, and so when I got that request to be candidate for that role, it came a bit as a surprise. But what really encouraged me was the trust I got from our ocean and climate experts to take up that role. It is a facilitating role, and so that means per definition that it will be all about listening to what parties and non-parties expect from the ocean dialogue, what they see, what they have as ambition on strengthening the nexus between the climate, ocean and biodiversity regimes. And so I think in the first phase it will be certainly very much about listening. It will be also a co-role from the developing countries. The nomination is not communicated yet, so also that is something on which I have to wait, but look forward very much to work together with the co-chair. Now, in any case, it's not a completely new setting. We had the ocean and climate dialogue over the past years, and that is a very important base to work upon, and it's well. I'm really grateful for the work that was undertaken by Giulio Cordano and Niall O'D, in the sense that they really succeeded in getting a very good, strong involvement in the ocean and climate dialogue. They also managed to elevate the discussions, and so it is very much a different situation than it used to be before the ocean and climate dialogue was established. I think when looking back at the past years from the ocean and climate dialogue, there are two major achievements. One, and I think also what Angelique said about her experience, it's very important that there is this connection between the different communities and the different regimes has been established. So that gives you a basis to work upon. And secondly, I think what became obvious in the ocean and climate dialogue is that when you look at all the issues under consideration under UNFCCC, and that goes from adaptation, science, mitigation, capacity building, the follow-up of GST, and so forth, all of them have either a synergy or a potential synergy with ocean issues. So I think that's basically the basis from which to start. What the big challenge is now to increase the impact of the ocean and climate dialogue, and for increasing the impact of the ocean and climate dialogue, I think the key thing is to really make a difference on the big political discussions that are ongoing under the climate regime, and making the connection also with the BBNJ treaty challenges. And when saying the big political issues, I think there are basically 4 issues that really are central to me. I can go a bit into this, but maybe I eat up a bit of my time for the second question already then, and please compensate for that. But well, firstly, there's of course the BBNJ treaty. It's a major achievement, and as everyone here, I hope that it will be entering into force as soon as possible and become fully operational. But as also said by Olive, there is a very strong link already with climate already established in BBNJ. You have the issue of the cumulative impacts under the impact assessment. We all know that the emission of greenhouse gases has severe impacts on the health of the ocean, on ocean acidification and many other environmental challenges. So the climate issue is at stake, and that goes far beyond the impact assessment. It also matters for the BBNJ in general. It matters for the area-based management. So in any case, the situation is that both are per definition kind of twins, in the sense that BBNJ has interest in high mitigation ambition under the Paris Agreement, while BBNJ will also have to undertake its work taking into account the the climate impacts. So that is very clear, and so making sure that both have establish a cooperation in that sense, express their mutual expectations is something that is, I think, a very big issue. The second issue deals with adaptation. We had the discussion in the past years on the global goal on adaptation. We established the UAE framework on resilience, and I think it's obvious that this establish a potentially very strong framework in both in the terms of management of adaptation, by putting in place clear expectations on how to reinforce adaptation policy, with early warning systems, with having the plans, with implementing the plans, with monitoring the plans, all with a timeline that has to come to a finalization by 2030, in 5 years only. And what we also have in the adaptation setting in the UAE framework is the link with the SDGs and with the biodiversity framework. So there are the thematic goals there. There are the thematic goals that are clearly spelled out. The goals on protecting ecosystems and biodiversity. The goal on food security. Also the goal on water. The goal on human settlements. So all of these have a marine ocean component, and these thematic goals have been identified, but they have to become operational in quite short notice. We have 1 year to work on that, and so the hooks are obviously there. I think nobody can neglect that all of these teams have a ocean component, but there's still work to do to make it fully defined. The third issue that I want to mention is the mitigation side and the NDCs. For mitigation and NDCs, I think that we had a very strong result last year with the UAE consensus, with guidance on what is expected in terms of NDCs, saying that NDCs need to be aligned with 1.5. They need to be economy-wide, include all sectors as well, all gases. But it also clearly says that what is included on the ocean in the UAE consensus text needs to take into account. Needs to be taken into account. So the UAE consensus is very clear that NDCs are expected to implement the GST outcome, and that also goes for para 28 with the energy transition, where obviously offshore and ocean energy are very key. If you look at the North Sea, there's the ambition there to triple offshore, and that will be the largest source of renewables for Europe. So it's very important. The fourth link I would like to mention. Yes, I have to close. Is on finance and the importance of NCQG, which really has to enable all the actions that we envisage. Sorry that I took a bit of time, but please take some credit from the second question.
Thank you very much, Ulrich, for sharing very elaborate views on the synergies between climate change and ocean protection. I think, like you said, that the tools are there in the various treaties. It's just a question of starting working on them and making them operational. So let's now move into let's transition into the actual panel. During this discussion, we'd like to explore how the climate process, and we've touched upon a few elements already, but especially the communication of the new nationally determined contributions and the indicators around adaptation policies can support activities around marine protected areas and the conservation of our ocean and biodiversity. So I will start with you again, Angelique. As you know, as we all know, marine ecosystems play a crucial role in the fight against climate change, but they are still very much underrepresented in climate policies. How do you think we can make the ocean play a greater role within the formatting of NDCs, and what ocean components specifically should be included in those NDCs?
Thanks for the question, and I'm going to share the experience of the Seychelles, but also the replication of that work within the Western Indian Ocean. So back in, I think it was about 2020, 2021, this was around Marrakesh. Finally, Paris had entered into force, and we had all these countries say, we need BlueNDCs. And there was a question around, what in the world does a BlueNDC look like? What does it mean? What does it include? And Seychelles, the government of Seychelles was particularly keen to make sure that it had a BlueNDC. And it managed to have a section in the last NDC, predominantly in the adaptation component of the NDC, where it looked at a section on blue economy. But the one I want to look at more closely today and share with you is a partnership of the government of Seychelles, the Seychelles Conservation and Climate Adaptation Trust, as well as Pew Trusts and other partners like the University of Seychelles, University of Oxford, who decided to see how to include coastal wetlands or blue carbon ecosystems in the nationally determined contributions. And here, in particular, Seychelles has mangroves and seagrass meadows. So, of course, those were the two ecosystems in focus. And the way in which the Seychelles did this was, first of all, you need to know what you have. Right? You cannot manage what you haven't measured. So the idea was to actually do a thorough seagrass mapping to start with, and this was both remote sensing and a huge component of ground truthing as well. But then and that was included as the initial step required to blue the NDC and to include blue carbon ecosystems in the NDCs, but then to make a commitment around protection. And Seychelles was I think, very ambitious, but was already on a pathway with the first Debt for Nature swap for ocean conservation to looking at marine conservation. And Seychelles was very ambitious and said, if I recall correctly, by 2025, it would protect 50% of these critical blue carbon ecosystems of mangroves and seagrasses, and by 2030, 100%. Guess what? We're in 2024, and 99% of seagrass meadows are under some form of marine protection, right? So that's, really thinking about bluing these NDCs, but the work's not done. I think this is just one element of it. There is management plans that now need to be put in place, and really thinking about what are the allowable activities that make sure that there's effective protection. And I mean, I won't labor the point around the importance of these critical blue carbon ecosystems, but just to say that as a country that is dependent on fisheries and tourism, they're significantly important to livelihoods and the economy. But as part of that work, and I think this is an important component which Ulrich would have just mentioned, finance. Because, of course, when we think about putting these area-based management tools into the NDCs and thinking about protecting critical blue carbon ecosystems, we don't want to head into this paper park kind of day, right? We don't want to head backwards. So what is really needed, especially for small island developing states like the Seychelles, is finding how we can have finance to support this protection. But that's not the most exciting part. I think this was a great story and a great success of the Seychelles. But of course, this work is now being replicated in other countries in the Western Indian Ocean, like Kenya, Tanzania, including Zanzibar, Mozambique, and Madagascar. So it's really exciting for the region as a whole in the Western Indian Ocean to have that complete mangrove and seagrass mapping that's going to take place and hopefully will feature as into the NDCs, whether it's this one or the next. I'll end there from a national perspective, but I don't want to lose the BBNJ thread here, because a lot of countries or a lot of thinking is going on around is BBNJ, is area-based management tools in the high seas can be seen as climate action as well. And to my mind, the answer has to be yes. And I would, this hasn't been mentioned yet, but I think a critical development for this year was the advisory opinion of the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea that said that your obligation to protect and preserve the marine environment under Article 192 of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea goes beyond Paris. This is not only about NDCs. You have to do more. You have to do what is necessary to protect and preserve the environment. So I am a firm advocate that we need to get the work right under NDCs, but that's not the end. We also need to think about how these area-based management tools can contribute to our climate action collectively when we think about BBNJ as well. So I'll end it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angelique, for that very elaborate answer and for sharing the example of the Seychelles. And it's inspiring to hear how it actually set an example for other countries. And thank you also for making the link with the Unclose Obligation under 192. Lily, from your perspective, what do you think should happen to make the ocean play a bigger role in climate adaptation plans? And why do you think the ocean is currently underrepresented in those adaptation plans?
Yeah, when we think about integrating ocean into climate strategies, it becomes very clear that ocean isn't just another simple component, that it's essential for climate health. In truth, ocean health is climate health. Still, the ocean is still largely unrepresented when we're talking about climate strategies. Well, COP15, Kunming, and Montreal yielded lots of results. Ocean was only mentioned twice in a 5,000-word working document. And I think that really highlights just how unrepresented ocean is in talks with biodiversity and climate. You know, a lot of people, they feel a certain degree of apathy when you talk about ocean because a lot of people live in landlocked nations, and you can experience the effects of climate change every day through droughts, flooding, severe storms. But many people don't get the opportunity to visit oceans. There isn't this intrinsic link, and that leads people to shy away from ocean advocacy. The ocean plays an indispensable role when it comes to the climate. Since the 1970s, it has absorbed over 90% of excess heat from the atmosphere and 30% of human-generated CO2 emissions. Species like mangroves and coral reefs, they're also instrumental in the fight against climate change. It absorbs CO2, acting as carbon sinks, lowering the atmospheric temperatures, but also serving as buffers for storms. to fully integrate the ocean into climate strategies, we need a very comprehensive plan. And it begins with policy, right? The BBNJ agreement, known as the High Sea Treaty, has been very instrumental. It's the first legally binding treaty to protect biodiversity in the high seas and establish things like marine protected areas, which are important towards ocean and climate health. However, BBNJ is not the only mechanism we need to advance ocean and climate. I keep talking about education, but it's incredibly important. People feel this apathy towards the ocean because they cannot experience and connect with this. This is where education comes in. We have to educate young people, especially in elementary schools and middle schools, around oceans. So even if they do live in a landlocked nation, they can still foster this care for oceans and marine animals and recognize its importance in fostering, climate campaigns. I understand how difficult education reform can be, as I often try and talk to senior officials and they talk to me about limited financing or different governments. However, there's a shorter term solution. Social media is very, very important. And there are amazing ocean storytellers that help. There are many amazing ocean storytellers on social media that create content that inspire people to take action. For example, by posting a simple video of a beautiful oceanscape or a marine species, it creates this connection and it erases this barrier people feel towards the ocean when they haven't been around it. They develop an appreciation for its importance regardless of their geographical location. Now, beyond public awareness, it's essential to integrate ocean resilience into formal national policies, right? National governments can start embedding the BBNJ agreement protections in their nationally determined contributions and continue to prioritize ocean health, where they're also thinking about climate resiliency. So having this in their different government plans increases the awareness of ocean-based solutions on a global scale. It encourages nations to consider marine environment to their climate goals. It fosters collaboration within governments, and that collaboration piece is very important. The ocean is so expansive, it covers so much of the earth, and that allows for very meaningful collaboration between nations. So international collaboration is essential towards advancing ocean-centered climate action. The ocean connects all of us. Its health has broad implications, from storms to food insecurity. Coastal and island nations, they face the brunt of ocean acidification, loss of marine biodiversity. And it's essential that we also listen to these nations when we're considering different ocean strategies. They have a wealth of knowledge that is just waiting to be explored, and we must listen to them when we are discussing what our priorities are. Lastly, this is COP29, and it's the finance COP, so we inevitably have to talk about finance. We really need money for ocean solutions. We need money for education, public awareness campaigns. We also need money for the research that we need to do to illustrate the importance of ocean health and climate health. At the end of the day, we need people to start caring, because as we've seen, when people start caring, there starts to be actions. When people start being educated, they can start lobbying governments and come to these spaces. And we understand the importance of ocean health. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your views, especially on the role of the ocean in the climate system and also on ocean literacy and education. I think that's indeed of paramount importance. So thank you very much. Olive, let's move to you now. How do you think adaptation policies can contribute directly to the 30 by 30 target? So for the audience, that's the global goal to protect 30% of the ocean by 2030. So how do you think the adaptation policies can contribute to this target as well as other biodiversity goals?
Thank you for the question. So, the Pacific is home to some of the most biologically diverse ecosystems in the world, but it also faces the threats of climate change, overfishing, and habitat destruction. So, adaptation policies that are tailored to the Pacific are pivotal in meeting both the 30 by 30 targets as well as the BBNJ goals. This is contributing to the protection and the resilience of biodiversity across the land and ocean areas. So some of the points I want to touch on is that adaptation policies should focus on marine protected areas and should prioritize marine protected areas and blue carbon initiatives. This can build climate resilience while supporting biodiversity protection. It can also look at integrating indigenous knowledge in adaptation policies. As I've highlighted before, the integration of traditional knowledge is extremely important because indigenous peoples and local communities have a deep understanding of traditional knowledge that can enhance adaptation policies. So the integration of traditional knowledge into climate adaptation can improve both climate resilience and biodiversity outcomes. Also, by supporting the indigenous peoples and local communities, traditional knowledge and management in the context of BBNJ, the adaptation policies can also look at meeting the 30 by 30 target and as well as focusing on indigenous-led conservation practices. An example of this is the locally managed marine areas network, which arise out of close consultation with IPLCs and they're not only arising out of consultations with IPLCs, but they're also managed by them. And today, these locally managed marine areas employ a wider range of area-based management measures, including taboos. So this is, for example, the no-take zones. And my last point is on the stronger regional cooperation. Regional cooperation is essential for the success of adaptation policies and for achieving both the 30 by 30 and BBNJ goals. So we're looking at collaborative initiatives across the Pacific Island where they can support large-scale marine conservation efforts and improve the resilience of biodiversity in the face of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olive, and thank you for underlining once again the importance of IPLCs and traditional knowledge. Yes, Ulrich, you mentioned a lot of things in your introduction. I was wondering if there are any key takeaways that you would like to share with the audience on ocean conservation and the role it should play in defining the indicators and also in NDCs. Do you have any key takeaways that you would like to share? Thank you.
Thanks. I will be a lot shorter this time. Well, I think the difficult communication or the difficult relationship between the climate and community or regime and ocean community and regime a couple of years ago was not so much that there was a kind of different interest or a completely opposite view on issues, but it had to do a lot with the simple fact that UNFCCC process was very much oriented on policy instruments. On policy instruments without giving them that much thematic sectoral content from the beginning, because that was something that was often sensitive and and was then considered as being nationally determined. And so it struggled a bit with how to deal with legitimate demands to give much more attention to sectoral issues, to teams, and that does not only go for ocean, but also, for instance, for energy and for transport. We didn't have much discussions on transport and energy within UNFCCC. How strange that might sound, and so I think there are two things that are very important. One thing is that certainly with the outcome last year, there's much more potential to have sectoral thematic discussions within UNFCCC. And secondly, I think the hooks are there both in the NDCs and in the adaptation policies to give it a very strong synergy with ocean. And I think it's it comes down to really collecting guidance that is out there on how you could translate ocean issues in adaptation policies, taking into account the teams that are established, taking into account the adaptation policy frameworks that have to be set up. And it's also about collecting what is around there on what the ocean can mean in terms of mitigation efforts in NDCs. Also, that is very important. So, well, in short, I think the situation is much better to have a more mature relationship between the two regimes, but it comes down to really have a good focus and present insights that are easy to incorporate in the policy tools that we will be all developing in the coming years within the climate sphere.
Thank you very much, Ulrich, and good to hear that you're optimistic on the future on that. So, dear panelists, our time is up, but I want to thank you sincerely for being here and sharing your views with the audience. I invite you to take a seat on the first row, and we will have we have a small gift for you to thank you for being here today, and also an applause maybe from the audience for the panel. Thank you. Okay, so let's now move to our presentation segment. I'm pleased to introduce Vicky Stratigaki, who is a coastal and offshore engineering expert at Jan de Nul Group. She will present how Belgian marine experts from government, industry, and academia are working with nature to achieve biodiversity, climate adaptation, and climate mitigation goals through international and cross-sectoral collaboration. This approach highlights the innovative ways Belgium is leading in sustainable marine practices. So, dear Vicky, you have the floor.
So maybe you can hear me now? Okay, I will continue that way. Thank you very much for the nice introduction. Also, thank you very much for inviting me here today to talk about how we innovate in working with nature at the Jan de Nul Group, together with our Belgian partners from the government and the academia. Jan de Nul is an internationally operating marine infrastructure contractor, and innovation is very important for us. This is how we can create original value, and this is how we can develop new solutions for new upcoming economic challenges. Through innovation, we build equipment and vessels, next generation vessels, but we also develop new methods, new techniques for our projects. And these techniques may refer to nature-based solutions, nature-inclusive designs, and marine ecosystem restoration techniques. Now, when we talk about these techniques in Jan de Nul, we use the term working with nature, but there are differences between them. So nature-based solutions use natural ecosystems and processes to address environmental challenges, such as climate adaptation and coastal protection. An example is the mangrove restoration projects to protect coastlines from erosion, to protect the habitats there, and to sequester carbon. On the other hand, we have nature-inclusive designs, which focus on designing marine infrastructure in a way that it can support biodiversity. An example is nature-inclusive offshore wind farms when we introduce artificial reefs. And then we also have the active restoration, which involves restore and rehabilitation of degraded marine habitats. And an example is the creation of biogenic oyster reefs from scratch. Now, about these oyster reefs, Jan de Nul has already a long track record in this type of projects, in projects funded by the European Commission, the Flemish government, and the Belgian federal government. And in these projects, we work together with the government, with knowledge institutes, and with other companies from the private sector. Now, why did we choose oysters, and more specifically, the European flat oyster? It has been very important in Europe since centuries. It has been seen as food resource, and it has been acknowledged for its important ecosystem services. It could be found previously at hard substrates, but there has been a significant oyster habitat destruction in the past decades everywhere in Europe due to imported diseases of the oysters, to overexploitation, and due to climatic effects. Now, in order to deal with these problems with oyster reefs, in Belgium we have introduced a series of projects, and we have set up a roadmap for flat oyster reef restoration. And Jan de Nul has been present in every single project that is related to pilots for oyster reef restoration. So back in 2020, we started with the Horizon United project, which is being followed up by the Horizon Europe Old Farms project, and these are about the introduction of artificial oyster reefs in offshore wind farms, in the Bell wind farms. Nowadays, we are implementing the Bell Reefs and Blue Connect projects, which are purely about active restoration of oyster reefs. And at the same time, we started with a recovery research project coordinated by Jan de Nul, which is about facilitating the upscaling, you mentioned that, the upscaling of this type of restoration. Now, I will give you briefly an idea of what we are actually doing in these projects. In the United project, which is about oyster reefs in offshore wind farms, we constructed oyster restoration structures, and we have installed them on top of the scour protection layers around the foundations of offshore wind monopiles. We deployed these structures, and only 9 months after their deployment, we went back there with divers, and we found out two things. One, that there has been settlement of oysters, new oysters around the reefs, and that there has been, these raw oysters have attracted many different species. And this is exactly what we wanted to achieve with these oyster reefs. Now, at this moment, we are carrying out the Bell Reef's Oyster Reef Restoration project, which focuses on gravel beds in the Belgian part of the North Sea. We are coordinating the technical part of this project, and we are doing it together with our partners from the knowledge institutes and the government. And we are carrying out this project in different phases. Now we are at the phase that we are identifying locations that are suitable for the installation of oyster reefs. So in September 2024, a couple of months ago, we did a detailed monitoring and survey for these locations. Here you see also some sampling results of the seabed, where we looked at several sites where we can do oyster reef restoration. Now, in this project, we start with a location that we have identified as ideal for the installation of oyster reefs. Then we go there with Jan de Nul, and we install oyster reef substrates that have been inoculated in advance with oyster larvae. And then the idea is that after some time, these oyster reefs will become fully self-sustaining, and they will support biodiversity. So that's the idea. And finally, we also have the Recovery project, which is about upscaling oyster reef deployment. And this one is specifically focusing on nature-inclusive designs for offshore marine infrastructure. This project is also coordinated by Jan de Nul. And we have set up a number of research lines. We do a lot of research here in Recovery. First of all, we are focusing on the materials for these substrates. Then we go there and look at the structural layout and hydrodynamic performance of the oyster reefs. In other words, how do they behave under the action of waves and currents in the highly energetic environment in the North Sea. We look at oyster reef inoculation techniques in large scale, and especially the part of Jan de Nul, our research part, is to look at the upscaling of the techniques that we use to install oyster reefs in large scale. We look at the inoculation, the handling, the vessel loading, the deployment, of course, of the reef, maintenance and monitoring. For the inoculation, we recently completed a number of laboratory tests. Jan de Nul is also specifically focusing on how to use our fall pipe rock installation vessels for this upscaling of oyster reef deployment. Okay, so this first part of my presentation was about oyster reefs and how we work in our projects together with Belgian partners from the government and the academia to achieve these oyster reef goals. Now, in the second part of my presentation, I will talk about mangrove nature-based solutions, which again, we realized together with Belgian partners from the government and the academia, but this time in other parts of the world, not in Belgium. So specifically, I will talk about how we transform dredged material into mangrove habitats within the aquaforest project, which is something that we do in Ecuador. First of all, why mangroves? Mangroves offer a long list of important ecosystem services, so they act as filter, purifying the water and the air. They offer coastal protection against flooding and storm surges. They offer socioeconomic benefits for the local communities, and they act as important biodiversity hotspots. But nowadays, mangroves are under pressure all over the world. So there is a significant degradation of these ecosystems, and also in Ecuador. So for these reasons, because of this pressure that mangroves experience all over the world, and because of all these benefits that they offer, we have chosen mangroves for the aquaforest project. A second reason is that mangrove trees grow very easily, almost spontaneously on sediments. And at Yandenul Group, we work with sediments in our dredging project. So this means that we don't look at sediment as waste. We can actually look at sediments as a resource and use it as reuse it in a circular and sustainable way to create new mangrove ecosystems. And this is how the idea for aquaforest was born within Yandenul Group. Now, a few words about the project area. In aquaforest, we create a new island from scratch. There are other islands in the area in the vicinity of the project site, like this one. And why Ecuador? Back in 2018, Yandenul started a 25-year contract for the maintenance dredging of the access channel to the ports of Guayaquil. And this means that Yandenul has a long-term presence in the area, which is very important for the project as well. For aquaforest, we have chosen a tidal flat area, which is very close to our dredging activities. And actually, both visually and through detailed studies, we had seen that there is a deposition of sediments at that location in a natural way. So we went there and we elevated the area by bringing dredged sediment. Now, a few words about our approach, engineering approach. First of all, we focus on the establishment of the initial conditions that are ideal for mangroves to grow. And this is something that we do through our expertise in eco-engineering of the project site. And eco-engineering may involve, first of all, elevation of the project site using dredged sediments, providing the right drainage, bringing the right species on the island in the right density, using the right quality of sediment, and providing at the end the protection of the new island. Now, we created a sandbank. We filled in the inner part of the island with dredged material, and at the end we built a semi-permeable bamboo wall, which is a temporary structure, and is there to protect the juvenile mangrove trees, which are still fragile. Now, after creating the initial conditions that are ideal for mangroves to grow, we perform both assisted and natural afforestation will take place in the future. So assisted afforestation means that we went there and we actively planted a number of trees. And the idea is that this habitat will become completely autonomous in the future and no human intervention will be required anymore. That's the idea. And through the eco-engineering that we performed, this is very promising. Now you see how the project looks like within the first 1 to 3 years and how it will evolve within the next 5 and 10 years when the mangrove tree density and the growth will increase. I give you here an idea of how the island looked like right after the completion of the dredging works, during the active planting of some trees, and at the end of the construction of the bamboo wall. Now, we created this new nature-based solutions lab, living lab, but we need to monitor it. We need to study it. We need to perform research and see how it is performing. So we introduced a number of research and monitoring programs. So back in May 2024, the Wet Coast Monitoring Research Project started, which is this one is focusing on carbon sequestration. The Aquaforest project is supported financially by the Flanders International Climate Action Program and by IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, and it's also actively supported by a number of local governmental organizations. The project consortium is coordinated by Jan de Nul Group, and it involves 3 universities, 2 Belgian universities and 1 local university from Ecuador, 3 other private companies and an NGO. So Aquaforest is a very nice co-creation example for co-creation between Belgian partners from the government, the knowledge institutes and the Belgian industry, and between international organizations and local communities. So in a nutshell, this is how we are working with nature at Jan de Nul together with our Belgian partners from the government and the academia, in order to achieve a number of sustainable development goals in our unique projects that are both in Belgium and abroad, and in order to achieve innovative working with nature solutions. So thank you very much for your attention. This was my presentation about our projects with nature.
Thank you, Vicky, for your very interesting presentation, and I hope that many more projects like the ones you described will follow in the future. Dear guests, as we are approaching the end of today's event, we're honored to have Belgium's newly appointed Special Envoy for BBNJ, Ambassador Willem van de Voorde, for some remarks. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, dear Arno. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, friends of the oceans, it's a pleasure and an honor for me to speak at this Belgian side event. It's my first day in my new function as Belgium's Special Climate Envoy for Climate, Environment and BBNJ. It goes without saying that a job title like this, with that I'm very much interested in the discussion around synergies between the BBNJ, UNFCCC and the CBD. Discussions like today's are essential in our pursuit of an efficient and holistic approach to addressing biodiversity loss and climate disruption. The swift entry into force of the BBNJ agreement is essential if we are to achieve the global goal of protecting at least 30% of the ocean by 2030. In order to protect biodiversity and address climate change, we must safeguard nature beyond our national jurisdictions. And efforts, we have heard it, are well underway to achieve the 60 ratifications which are needed to bring the BBNJ agreement into force. But the true challenge lies in implementing the agreement. And in Belgium, we believe that a strong and independent secretariat will be key to advancing our collective mission to protect the ocean. Belgium is therefore honored to be a candidate to host this secretariat in Brussels. Belgium has long been a key advocate for international ocean protection, being a key initiator of the Blue Leaders Initiative and playing a role in advancing the BBNJ negotiations. Protecting the marine environment is also a priority at home. Belgium was one of the first countries to develop a comprehensive marine spatial plan which balances activities at sea and sets conditions for their sustainability. Moreover, Belgium has significant marine expertise, supported by state-of-the-art marine research infrastructure that is recognized internationally. Our research vessels, Belgica and Simon Steven, play important roles in marine exploration and biodiversity studies. Key facilities such as the coastal and ocean basin in Ostende and the marine test platform Blue Accelerator provide ideal environments for testing new marine technologies. Our Marine Robotics Center and the Starezo Research Station contribute significantly to the advancement of marine science, and our country plays a central role in managing international marine biodiversity data systems, including by hosting an office of UNESCO's Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, with a particular focus on capacity building and knowledge transfer. And as you have heard, also the private sector plays an important role with Jan de Nul and the projects which have been proposed just a few minutes ago. We are convinced that Brussels, our capital, can be the ideal home for the BBNJ Secretariat. It is a true diplomatic hotspot with over 180 embassies and diplomatic missions, as well as direct connections to every corner of the globe. It provides secure and high quality infrastructure and an excellent quality of life. This makes Brussels the perfect hub for international collaboration on ocean governance. In short, Belgium is an important player in marine science and sustainable ocean management. We are ready and equipped to support the world's efforts to protect and sustainably manage the ocean. Our candidacy to host the Secretariat aligns with our dedication to the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity. We strongly believe that locating the new BBNJ Secretariat in Brussels, in Belgium, will enhance the effectiveness of our collective efforts to protect the oceans. I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Ambassador, for underlining the assets Brussels has to host the future BBNJ Secretariat, and also congratulations on the assumption of your new role. Now it is my pleasure to give the floor to Belgium's Minister for Energy, Her Excellency Tine van der Straeten. Dear Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning to all of you, dear ladies, dear gentlemen, Your Excellency, Mr. Ambassador, and also friends of the ocean. It is, as the Ambassador said, also for me an honor and a pleasure to be here today to discuss one of the most pressing issues of our time: the health and sustainability of our oceans. The ocean is the heart and also the lungs of our planet. It provides most of the oxygen we breathe, and it serves as a vital source of food and medicine. And the marine environment is a vast reservoir of biodiversity and an essential force in climate regulation. And we cannot underestimate this, because the floods of Spain, it was the oceans working against us. So we need to ensure the well-being of both our planet and our humanity. We need a healthy ocean. And we know that the ocean's resilience is under immense strain today. Overfishing, pollution, and the visible impacts of climate change, from record-breaking sea temperatures to rising acidity and sea levels. These are stark reminders of the urgent need to act. But today we also advance. We advance on the objectives of the BBNJ agreement, and we are reminded by doing so by the incredible opportunities and shared responsibilities we all bear. The future of our oceans, the future of energy, and the future of our planet depends on the decisions we make today. And in Belgium, we are acutely aware of our role in this global effort. The Ambassador already spoke about BBNJ, but I will also talk about energy. Because over 20 years ago, we took our first steps towards a clean energy future with the installation of our very first offshore wind turbines. And today we are also taking another monumental step forward with the construction of Belgium's first energy island in the North Sea, the Princess Elizabeth Island. It is a landmark project. It's being built by the Belgian consortium Edison, composed by both our dredging companies, Jan de Nul and also DEME, and it stands at the forefront of the energy transition. One of the major financiers is the European Investment Bank. It will also connect not only our domestic offshore wind turbines, but also our neighboring countries, like, for example, the Netherlands. And the electricity will flow also to Luxembourg. So I think a picture of the energy islands, and specifically the nature-inclusive design, would have been a beautiful picture of a beautiful landmark project. One on the slideshow, but here on the walls would be a good one. It is a very important project. By 2028, the island will become a pivotal link in Europe's renewable energy grid. By 2028, we will start connecting the first new-built offshore wind turbines. And 2030 onwards, we will connect to other offshore wind turbines, for example, in the UK. And the UK regulator, Ofgem, today gave a green light on the subsea cable between the UK and Belgium with its landing point on the island. But the Princess Elizabeth Island is not only a marvel of energy and not only a marvel of engineering, but also a testament to the integration of nature-inclusive design. Through careful design, by the beginning, we have made sure that the island, along with offshore wind farms, it will become a sanctuary for biodiversity. The islands will, by design, being equipped with ledges for the black-legged kittiwake, a vulnerable seabird, also artificial reefs to support fish, oysters, the flat oyster, the mussels, algae, and also sea anemones. And furthermore, we are restoring the gravel beds that once flourished in the Belgian North Sea. And so this project is not just about energy. It is about energy production, it's about biodiversity preservation, and this project showed that both go hand in hand. And I'm absolutely convinced that this project is also setting a new global standard for offshore wind development, not only in the North Sea, but in sea basins across Europe and across the world. A standard where respect for nature is not an afterthought, it's not a mitigation issue, but it's a fundamental design principle. And this was also a co-creation project by engineers and also biologists and ecologists. They came together with an architect to decide which design measures would be implemented the first. Ladies and gentlemen, biodiversity and energy production, but it's in fact a triple solution. To combat climate change, to strengthen our economy, and also to fortify Europe's energy independence. By harnessing our natural wind resources, we reduce our reliance on nations like Russia, securing Europe's autonomy while driving innovation and resilience in our own economy. The North Sea, like many of the world's oceans, is very fragile and under growing pressure. Coastal development, fishing, shipping, and energy production, it demands all this shared place. And the Princess Elizabeth Island shows that renewable energy and biodiversity can flourish together. And of course, our vision goes beyond our Belgian borders. Our offshore wind initiatives are part of a much larger, continent-wide, and indeed also a global effort to address the climate crisis and promote energy security. And the global community must come together to share this knowledge, support one another, and also accelerate the development of the energy solutions that will provide our future. And this is where regional initiatives come into play, like the Greater North Sea Basin Initiative. These regional initiatives are indeed very important. We can coordinate our efforts and we can ensure that the growth of offshore wind energy in the North Sea is balanced with the need to protect marine diversity, preserving fishing grounds and safeguard the interests of coastal communities. In fact, in just 1 week from now, we are organizing an interministerial meeting to further strengthen this cross-sectoral dialogue, creating the platform for a cohesive, ecosystem-based approach to the management of the greater North Sea. And the BBNJ agreement brings a similar vision, ensuring our shared ocean resources that these are managed responsibly. And as we develop offshore wind projects like the Princess Elizabeth Island, we must ensure that we do this responsibly, safeguarding our marine ecosystems and also ensuring that the energy solutions we create are sustainable, both for today and for the future generations. And also, as a Minister of Energy, it is of utmost importance that also Ministers of Energy reaffirm Belgium's commitment to ocean conservation. As a founding member of the Blue Leaders Alliance, Belgium remains steadfast in our support of protecting 30% of the ocean by 2030. We played a key role in the BBNJ negotiations, and now with more than 100 countries having signed the treaty, is crucial to reach the necessary 60 ratifications, as the ambassador mentioned, to bring this historic agreement into force. And our aim is, if you allow me, Mr. Ambassador, our aim is to achieve this by the UN Ocean Conference in Nice next June. And I'm also pleased to inform you and confirm that Belgium's ratification process is advancing very well, with the Council of Ministers approving the ratification, and that preparations are underway to submit it to the Federal Parliament. And I would also like to congratulate you, Mr. Ambassador, with your first day on the job. And I want to tell everyone here that the ambassador comes from the European Union and that he is very well equipped to bring different views together and to broker a compromise when sometimes opinions are diverging. The discussions today remind us that the BBNJ agreement is not isolated, but deeply interwoven with other critical environmental frameworks, including the Convention on Biological Diversity and also the UNFCCC. And we are seeing the beginning of the bridges between these agreements, between the BBNJ, between the CBD and also the climate agreements. It is an essential start, but there is more work ahead. Events like this are crucial for fostering collaboration and building the shared commitment we need to protect our ocean and also to exchange the expertise that we in Belgium already have with regard to spatial planning and with regard to building offshore wind turbines, not only here in Belgium, but as Jan de Nul showed, also in other parts of the world. The challenges we face today, absolutely, they are vast. But through collaboration, through innovation, and also with a sense of a shared responsibility, we can turn them into opportunities. And together, we can build an interconnected, a resilient, and an environmentally sound society that leads the way for a global, just transition to sustainable energy. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Minister, for being here and for your inspiring remarks. So, ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of today's event. I would like to thank the panelists, the presenters, and of course also the audience for joining us today. We hope that you found today's discussions insightful and inspiring. And now let's continue our efforts towards a more sustainable ocean and climate future. Have a great day ahead, and please also don't forget the small gifts that we left for you on the chairs. Thank you.